These are the divorce papers, Femi said quietly, his voice filled with regret. You want to divorce me? She asked, her words laced with disbelief. After everything we've been through, you want to just throw it all away? You allowed the doctors to remove my womb. You stood there and let them take away the one thing that gave me a chance to be a mother again. And now, because we can't have another child, you want to get rid of me. Amaka and Femi had known each other for as long as they could remember. Growing up side by side in the busy streets of Abuja, their houses were so close that they could hear each other's laughter through thin walls. As children, they were inseparable, always playing together after school and running through the streets with the kind of carefree spirit that only childhood allows. Their bond was immediate and natural, and though they were meant to be in each other's lives from the start. Amaka the lively one had a way of drawing people in. She was full of life, their laughter echoing through their small neighborhood. She was always the first to start a conversation, making new friends or organizing games for other children. Femi, on the other hand, was quieter, more reserved. While Amaka loved to be out and about, Femi was happiest with a book in his hand, escaping into the worlds he found in the pages. Despite their differences, they complemented each other perfectly. Amaka pulled Femi out of his shell, and Femi grounded Amaka with his calm, thoughtful nature. As they grew older, their connection deepened in ways that they hadn't expected. By the time they reached university, it became clear that their friendship had transformed into something more. It wasn't just the way they looked at each other anymore. It was the way Femi's eyes lingered on Amaka when she wasn't looking, or the way Amaka's smile brightened just a little more when Femi was near. They studied different courses, but their paths were never far apart. Femi pursued engineering, spending long nights in the library while Amaka followed her passion for business, attending lectures and networking events. It was during their final year of the university that Femi began to realize what everyone else had already seen. Amaka wasn't just his best friend, but the love of his life. He found himself thinking about her more and more, imagining what life would be if they were together, not just as friends, but as partners. The idea of proposing to her felt both exciting and terrifying, but Femi knew that there was no one else he could imagine spending the rest of his life with. After they both graduated, Femi started planning the proposal. He wanted it to be special, something that reflected the simplicity and depth of their relationship. He chose the beach, a quiet spot they often visited to escape the hustle and bustle of Abuja. It was their favorite place, a space where they could talk for hours, watch the waves crash against the shore, and just be together without any distraction. On that evening, the sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the water. Femi led Amaka down the sandy path, their hands intertwined as they walked in silence. Amaka didn't suspect anything, though she noticed Femi seemed quieter than usual. She didn't press him, assuming he was just lost in thought, as he often was. When they reached their favorite spot, Femi stopped and turned to face her. His heart was racing, but he managed to keep his voice steady as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Amaka, he began, his voice soft but sure. You've been my best friend for as long as I can remember. I can't imagine my life without you, and I don't want to. Will you please do me the honor of being my wife? Amaka's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment she was speechless. But then tears filled her eyes, and she smiled the brightest smile Femi had ever seen. Yes, she cried, throwing her arms around him. Of course! The proposal was simple, just like their love. Nothing extravagant, nothing over the top. It was perfect in its simplicity, a reflection of their quiet strength and their bond. A year later, they were married in a grand ceremony filled with family and friends. The wedding was a celebration of not just their love, but the journey they had taken together from childhood friends to lifelong partners. After the wedding, Amaka and Femi settled into routines of married life. For the first year, everything felt perfect. Their days were filled with laughter, late night talks, and shared dreams about the future they were building together. But as months passed, something began to shift. It was the absence of a child. It was something they assumed would happen in time, but it became a source of growing concern. They had always imagined their home filled with the laughter and chaos of children. Amaka would often talk about the large family she envisioned, where the sounds of little feet running through the house would bring joy. Femi shared in those dreams, but as 5 years went by without any sign of pregnancy, the hope they once felt slowly turned into worry. For Amaka, the pressure became unbearable. Coming from a traditional Igbo family, she knew that the absence of a child would not go unnoticed. While no one said anything directly, she could feel the weight of their expectations. The unspoken pressure hung over her family gatherings. Every phone call was, when will the good news come? Even though no one asked it out loud. Femi, the ever supportive husband, stood by her side all through it. "We will have a child when the time is right," he would say, wrapping his arms around her when the silence between them became too heavy. "I love you, and that's what matters most." But despite his reassurances, Amaka's worry grew with each passing month. She began to withdraw from the vibrant, outgoing person she had always been, her laughter growing less frequent and her smiles more strained. They visited doctors after doctors, seeking answers, but each consultation brought more confusions. One doctor suggested hormone treatment, another proposed lifestyle changes. They tried everything, changing their diet, tracking fertility windows, even consulting natural remedies and meeting traditional healers, but nothing worked. The longer the struggle continued, the more distant their dream of a family seemed. It was during one particularly difficult visit to the doctor that Amaka brought up the idea of IVF. She had done her research and believed it was their best chance. "I think we should just try in vitro fertilization," she told Femi one evening, her voice quiet but firm. Femi was hesitant. He had heard about IVF but wasn't sure about the risks, the cost, or how it would affect Amaka. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked, concerned. "I just don't want to see you go through more pain." Amaka, however, was determined. "Femi, we've tried everything else. I need to know that we did everything we could." Her eyes pleaded with him, and after days of thought, Femi agreed, though his heart was heavy with uncertainty. Their first attempt at IVF was filled with hope, but it ended in heartbreak. The fertilized egg did not implant, and Amaka was devastated. She withdrew from everyone, even Femi, unable to bear the weight of her disappointment. Femi, heartbroken by his wife's sorrow, tried his best to comfort her, but nothing seemed to reach her. It was as if the loss had created a wall between them. When Amaka suggested they try IVF a second time, Femi hesitated. He didn't want to see her go through any more pain, especially the emotional torment. But Amaka was insistent. "Please, Femi, just one more try, please." She begged. Reluctantly, Femi agreed, hoping that this time their story would have a different ending. Their second attempt was different. When the doctor confirmed that Amaka was pregnant, the joy that filled her heart was indescribable. Amaka cried tears of relief, and Femi, for the first time in years, allowed himself to believe that they would finally have the family they had always dreamt of. Their family celebrated the news, and for the first time in a long while, the strain that had weighed them down seemed to lift. The months that followed were filled with excitement and preparations. They decorated the nursery, attended prenatal appointments, and imagined what life would be like with their baby in it. Amaka began to feel herself again, her vibrant energy returning as the reality of motherhood approached. But fate had one more challenge in store for them. On the day Amaka went into labor, what was supposed to be a joyous occasion turned into a nightmare. Complication arose during delivery, and the doctor struggled to manage the situation. Femi paced the hospital, his heart pounding as he prayed for both his wife and their unborn child. When the doctor finally approached Femi, his face was serious. "We need to act quickly to save Amaka and the baby," the doctor explained, "but we would have to remove her womb." Femi's words seemed to stop for a moment. He knew the decision was necessary, but it was a heavy blow. With a lump in his throat, he gave his consent, knowing it was the only way to save the two people that mattered most to him. The surgery was successful. Amaka had survived, and so did their baby boy. They named him Chinedu, which means God leads, a name that carried the hope and gratitude they felt. The joy of having Chinedu in their lives was immeasurable, but the cost had been great. From the moment Chinedu was born, Amaka made sure he never lacked anything. She had waited too long for him, and now that he was here, she wanted to give him the world. If he wanted a toy, he got it. If he cried for sweets, they were handed to him instantly. Amaka couldn't say no to her miracle child, and in her eyes, there was no reason to. After all, hadn't they fought hard to have him? Femi watched with growing concern. He had seen how Amaka pampered Chinedu, and although he loved the son dearly, he worried about the effects of such indulgence. Chinedu was still very young, but Femi couldn't ignore the signs that were beginning to show at just 4 years old. Chinedu had already developed a temper. He would throw tantrums when things didn't go his way, screaming and kicking until Amaka gave in to his demands. At first, Femi thought it was just a phase, something Chinedu would outgrow, but as the years went by, the tantrums became more frequent and more aggressive. The domestic staff in their home were the first to notice. Chinedu had no respect for them. He would order them around like little servants, demanding that they attend to him immediately. If they hesitated for a second, he would yell and throw things in a fit of rage. One afternoon, while Femi was at work, Chinedu threw a particularly nasty tantrums when the housekeeper, Auntie Grace, didn't give him his favorite snack fast enough. He hurled his toys at her, screaming until she finally handed over the snack with trembling hands. When Auntie Grace reported this incident to Amaka, hoping she would discipline him, Amaka dismissed her concerns. He is just a child, Amaka said with a wave of her hand. He will outgrow it. But Femi wasn't so sure. He noticed that Chinedu's behavior was getting worse, not better. It wasn't just the staff who suffered his outburst. Femi himself had become a target of Chinedu's growing disrespect. Whenever Femi tried to discipline him, Chinedu would run straight to his mother, and Amaka would quickly come to his defense. Femi, he's just a child, he's a little boy, Amaka would say whenever Femi suggested that they needed to be firmer with their son. Let him be, he's still young and he will grow out of it. Femi felt powerless, didn't want to push Amaka too hard, especially knowing how much she had gone through to bring Chinedu into the world. He didn't want to be the source of more pain for her, so he kept quiet, hoping that with time, Chinedu would change. But deep down, Femi knew that things were only getting worse. When Chinedu started school, it became clear to everyone that his behavior wasn't just a phase. His teachers quickly noticed that he was disruptive and refused to follow the rules. He would talk back to them, refuse to sit still, and constantly pick on the quieter children in class. His classmates began to avoid him, and the teachers grew frustrated, but they hesitated to take any serious action because of the influence the family had within the school. One day, the situation reached a breaking point. During recess, Chinedu approached Aisha, a quiet and well-behaved girl in class, and demanded that she share her snack with him. Aisha, who always minded her own business, politely refused. This enraged Chinedu. Without warning, he pushed her hard, and Aisha fell to the ground. Shocked and upset, Aisha stood up and, in an attempt to defend herself, pushed him back. Chinedu stumbled and fell, bruising his knee in the process. The teacher on duty quickly intervened, separating the two children and taking Chinedu to the school nurse to have his knee treated. The school administration called Amaka to inform her of the incident, hoping to resolve the matter peacefully. But when Amaka arrived at the school, she was furious, not with Chinedu, but with the school for allowing such a situation to occur. Why wasn't my son protected? Amaka demanded, and she stormed into the principal's office. Her voice was sharp, her anger clear. Chinedu is a good boy. If that girl had just done what he asked, there wouldn't have been a problem. The principal, trying to mediate the situation, attempted to explain that both children were at fault. Madam, I understand your concern, but Chinedu pushed Aisha first. We need to address both children's behavior. But Amaka wouldn't hear of it. Are you trying to say my son is the problem? She snapped. Chinedu is a good child, and he was only reacting because that girl disrespected him. The principal, who was used to dealing with difficult situations, found herself in a bind. The school valued the financial contributions that Amaka and Femi made. They didn't want to jeopardize their relationship with such an influential family. But at the same time, the principal knew that giving in to Amaka's demand would be unfair to Aisha and her family. In the end, however, the pressure from Amaka was too great. She threatened to withdraw Chinedu from the school and take their financial support elsewhere if the school didn't take action against Aisha. Reluctantly, the principal agreed to suspend Aisha for a week, even though it was clear to everyone that the punishment was unjust. Aisha's parents were heartbroken and angry. Their daughter had been the victim, but now she was being punished because of the influence and power Amaka wielded. They felt powerless against the situation, but chose not to fight, knowing that nothing they did would change the outcome. They would rather choose peace over chaos. As Amaka left the principal's office, satisfied that justice had been served in her favor, Femi couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control. He loved Chinedu deeply. Chinedu was his son, but he knew that their son's behavior wasn't just a phase. The more they indulged him, the worse he became. As Chinedu approached his seventh birthday, his behavior worsened. The once spirited child was now a boy whose temper and entitlement controlled the household. Femi, increasingly frustrated, saw the warnings go ignored. Amaka, blind to the growing storm, continued to see her son through the lens of love and protection. To her, Chinedu was simply finding his way, and all the complaints about him were just so exaggerated. Despite numerous warnings from teachers and concerns from Femi, and complaints from the domestic staff, Amaka held firm in her belief that Chinedu would eventually outgrow his unruliness. But time was not helping. Chinedu's misbehavior was escalating, not just at home, but at school. He was known among his classmates for his aggressive behavior, and his reputation began to concern other parents. They whispered about him in school meetings, but no one dared to challenge Amaka directly because of her status in the community. Femi was increasingly anxious, knowing that something needed to be done, but every time he brought it up with Amaka, their conversation ended in frustration. She refused to see that their son was becoming uncontrollable, and every time Femi pushed, it only made things worse between them. One fateful day, things spiraled out of control. During recess at school, Chinedu had a confrontation with a girl named Gift. She was a quiet girl who always kept to herself. Chinedu had demanded that she give him her lunch, but Gift refused. Enraged, Chinedu pushed her. What he hadn't expected was for her to fall backward and tumble down the stairs. The entire playground fell silent as Gift hit her head on the concrete below. The sound echoing across the schoolyard. Gift's screams filled the air as the teachers rushed to her aid. She was bleeding and unconscious, and she had to be rushed to the hospital immediately. The news spread quickly, reaching Amaka and Femi within hours. Amaka was beside her with worry, but her concern wasn't for Gift, it was for Chinedu. She rushed to the school to collect him, ready to defend her son before she even heard the full story. Femi, on the other hand, was horrified. He immediately went to the hospital to check on Gift, fearing the worst. At the hospital, Femi was met with the angry, tear-filled stares of Gift's parents. They were devastated and furious, their child lying unconscious because of what Chinedu had done. Femi tried to apologize, even offering to pay for all the medical expenses, but Gift's mother, Stella, would have none of it. "We don't want your money," Stella snapped, her voice trembling with rage. "This is your fault. You and your wife have raised a spoiled, violent child, and now my daughter is the one suffering because of it." Femi felt the weight of her words hit him like a blow. He knew they were right. He had seen the signs for years, but he had allowed Amaka's protectiveness over Chinedu to silence his concerns. Now, the consequences of their indulgence were unfolding in the worst way possible. Meanwhile, back at home, Amaka had taken Chinedu away from the school. She was shaken by the incident, but still refused to see that Chinedu was to blame. When Femi returned from the hospital, he confronted her, desperate to make her understand the gravity of the situation. "Amaka, do you realize what Chinedu has done?" Femi asked, his voice filled with frustration and fear. "Gift could have died. This is so serious." But Amaka remained defensive. "He didn't mean to hurt her," she insisted. "Gift was rude to him. If she hadn't refused him, none of this would have happened. It was a mistake. Femi could hardly believe what he was hearing. This isn't about rudeness. Chinedu pushed her down the stairs. You can't keep making excuses for him. He needs help, Amaka. We need to take this seriously. Amaka's face hardened. You don't understand, she said quietly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and defiance. Chinedu is all I have. I've given everything up for him. I won't let anyone, not even you, take him away from me. Femi felt a deep sense of despair wash over him. He loved Amaka, but her refusal to see the truth was driving a wedge between them, and he knew now that her love for Chinedu, though well-meaning, had blinded her completely to the damage being done. As the news of the incident spread, the pressure on the school to take action grew. Gift eventually recovered, but her parents were not satisfied with a simple apology. They demanded that the school expel Chinedu, and when the school hesitated, fearing the financial consequences of losing the Adewale's support, Gift's parents threatened to go public with the story. Under pressure, the school approached Amaka and Femi, urging them to withdraw Chinedu voluntarily to avoid the scandal. Reluctantly, they agreed. Amaka was so livid. She felt betrayed by the very institution she had supported for years. In her anger, she took to social media accusing the school of being biased against her son. She painted herself as a victim, but the school quickly issued a warning, threatening to release the full details of the incident if she didn't stop. Faced with the potential for public humiliation, Amaka backs down. With Chinedu now out of school, things at home only worsened. He had more free time, which he used to act out even more. The staff found themselves at their wits' end, enduring his tantrums and bad behavior with no recourse. Amaka, exhausted and isolated, continued to cuddle Chinedu while Femi withdrew emotionally, finding solace in his work. The gap between Femi and Amaka grew wider, the tension in their home thick and suffocating. Femi, caught between his love for his wife and his growing fear of what Chinedu was becoming, didn't know how to reach Amaka. She had built a wall around herself and Chinedu, shutting Femi out of it. After weeks of searching, they finally found a school willing to accept Chinedu. The school was smaller and less prestigious than the one he had previously attended, but Amaka was desperate. She hoped that a fresh start in a new environment would help Chinedu become better. The school assigned Chinedu to Mr. Azan's class, a soft-spoken man who worked with the aid of crutches due to a childhood injury. Mr. Azan was known for his patience and his ability to handle difficult students, but nothing could have prepared him for Chinedu. From the first day, Chinedu tested Mr. Hazan's limit. He ignored instructions, disrupted the class, and bullied other students. Mr. Hazan, determined to manage the situation without resorting to harsh measures, tried to reason with Chinedu, but it was clear that the boy had no respect for authority. The school administration, aware of Chinedu's past, warned Mr. Hazan not to discipline him too strictly. They didn't want to risk losing Amaka's support, so they turned a blind eye to Chinedu's behavior, leaving Mr. Hazan to deal with the chaos in the classroom. Days turned into weeks. Mr. Hazan's patience wore thin. Chinedu seemed to take pleasure in tormenting the teacher, often mocking his disability and making cruel jokes at his expense. The other students, seeing that Chinedu could get away with anything, began to follow his lead. Mr. Hazan's classroom descended into disorder. One day, in the middle of a lesson, Chinedu snatched Mr. Hazan's crutches and ran out of the classroom, laughing as the teacher struggled to stand. The other students joined in, cheering Chinedu on as he mocked Mr. Hazan's inability to chase after him. Mr. Hazan, humiliated and enraged, had finally had enough. He called for two of the older boys in the class, Michael and Adamu, to bring Chinedu to him. The boys, eager to restore order, quickly grabbed Chinedu and brought him to the front of the class. Hold him down, Mr. Hazan ordered, his voice trembling with anger. Michael and Adamu obeyed, holding Chinedu firmly as Mr. Hazan retrieved his crutches. The classroom fell silent as Mr. Hazan, his face flushed with anger, raised one of the crutches and began to flog Chinedu. He struck him repeatedly, venting the frustration and humiliation he had endured over the past few months. Chinedu struggled and tried to scream, but one of the boys covered his mouth, muffling the sound. The other students watched in stunned silence, too afraid to intervene. As the blows continued, Michael's grip on Chinedu loosened, and in the chaos, Chinedu slipped and fell, hitting his head on the edge of the decks. Blood began to pool on the floor beneath Chinedu's head, and the room erupted in panic. Michael and Adumu backed away, horrified by what had just happened. The other students bolted from the classroom, screaming for help. Within minutes, teachers and staff flooded the room. They found Chinedu unconscious on the floor, with Mr. Hassan standing over him, crutches in his hand. The sight of the blood sent everyone into frenzy. An ambulance was called and Chinedu was rushed to the hospital. By the time they arrived, it was already too late. Chinedu was pronounced dead on arrival, and the blow to his head have caused irreparable damage. The news of his death spread quickly, reaching Amaka and Femi within few hours. Amaka was inconsolable. The loss of her only child shattered her, and she collapsed into a state of shock and grief. Femi, equally devastated, could barely bring himself to speak as he tried to comfort his wife, but nothing could ease the pain of losing their son. The day after Chinedu's death, the school wasted no time in suspending Mr. Hassan, and an official investigation was launched. The news of the tragedy spread like wildfire, and within few days it was making headlines across the country. Reporters swarmed the school and the hospital, digging for any scrap of information they could find. The public was divided. Some blamed Mr. Hassan for using excessive force, while others pointed to Chinedu's troubling behavior, questioning how a child had been allowed to reach such a dangerous point without any intervention. Chinedu's name became a subject of heated debate. The newspaper painted him as both a victim and a villain, depending on which one you read. Mr. Hassan, once a respected teacher, found himself demonized by one section of the public and pitied by another. Everyone had an opinion, and as the investigation unfolded, the blame was tossed around between Mr. Hassan, the school administration, and ultimately Femi and Amaka's parenting. The Adewale family became the center of media storm. Reporters camped outside their home, trying to get statements or photographs, while social media exploded with comments about parenting and Chinedu's behavior. Some questioned why Femi and Amaka had allowed Chinedu to become so out of control, while others sympathized with their loss. But for Femi and Amaka, the public's judgment was nothing compared to the guilt they felt in their hearts. They had lost their only child, and in their grief, the weight of their past decisions began to crush them. Femi tried to stay strong, not just for himself, but for Amaka. But there was no denying that the cracks in their relationship had begun to show. Everywhere they turned, there were reminders of Chinedu, the toys that still cluttered in his bedroom, the half-completed homework left on his desk, and the family photographs that adorned their living room. His absence was filled every corner of the home, and the silence was so unbearable. Amaka, once so vibrant and strong, was now a shadow of herself. She spent her days in a haze of grief, barely speaking and unable to eat. She locked herself in Chinedu's room, clutching his old clothes, refusing to leave. Femi, heartbroken and helpless, didn't know how to reach her. He had lost his son, but he felt like he was losing his wife as well. One evening, as they sat in silence at the dinner table, Femi finally broke down. "Amaka," he said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "We can't keep living like this. We need to talk." Amaka didn't look up. She kept her eyes fixed on the empty plate in front of her, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "What's there to talk about?" she replied, her voice hollow. Femi hesitated, unsure of how to begin. "We lost him," he whispered, "but we are losing each other too." Amaka's shoulders tensed, and for a moment Femi thought she might respond, but instead she stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back. "I can't do this right now," she said quietly, walking away before Femi could say another word. The distance between them only grew in the days that followed. Femi threw himself into handling the practical matters, meeting with the lawyers, speaking with investigators, and dealing with the endless flood of reporters. He tried to keep busy, hoping that the distraction would numb the pain, but nothing could ease the ache in his heart. He couldn't stop thinking about all the things he should have done differently, how he should have been firmer with Chinedu, and how he should have stood up to Amaka when it came to their son's discipline. Meanwhile, Amaka withdrew further into herself. She refused to speak to anyone outside of her family, shutting herself off from the world. The grief weighed on her heavily, but it was the guilt that crushed her. Deep down, she knew that her overindulgence of Chinedu had played a role in his death. She had ignored every warning sign, dismissed every complaint, and now her only child, the one who she had struggled so much to have, was gone. At night, Femi would lie awake, listening to Amaka's quiet sobs from the other side of the bed. He wanted to comfort her, to hold her and tell her that they would get through this together, but the words never came. The unspoken tension between them only deepened like a wound that refused to heal. And as the investigation into Chinedu's death progressed, the media frenzy intensified. Femi and Amaka's parenting was scrutinized by the public. Journalists published stories about their past, their wealth, and the ways in which Chinedu had been spoiled. It was a painful reminder of the truth Femi had been trying to avoid for so long. One afternoon, a particularly demanding article surfaced online questioning the couple's role in their son's behavior. The headline read, Strategy in Influence: How Overindulgence Led to Chinedu Adewale's Death. Femi read the article in silence, his heart sinking with every word. It painted a picture of a family who had failed their son, who had allowed his behavior to spiral out of control until he ended in tragedy. When Amaka saw the article, something inside her broke. She couldn't bear the public judgment, but more than that, she couldn't bear the truth that lay beneath it. The realization that she had played a part in Chinedu's downfall was too much to handle. As the investigation continued and the media storm raged on, Femi and Amaka stood at a crossroad. Their love for each other had always been strong, but now it was being tested in ways they had never imagined. The question that remained was whether their marriage could survive the grief, the guilt, and the pain that had torn their lives apart. The media continued to haunt them. The investigation into Chinedu's death was still ongoing, and every new development made headlines. Their lives were scrutinized in public, their parenting questioned, and every detail of their grief was laid bare before the world to see. It felt like they were living in a glass house with everyone watching, judging, and speculating about what exactly had gone wrong. Mr. Hassan, the teacher who had been involved in Chinedu's death, had been arrested and was awaiting trial. The case divided the community, with some people demanding justice for Chinedu, while others defended Mr. Hassan, arguing that he had been pushed to his breaking point by a very difficult child. The controversy only added to the couple's torment. Femi and Amaka found themselves grappling with conflicting emotions, anger, guilt, and confusion, unsure of where to direct their pain. Femi, despite his anger towards Mr. Hassan, couldn't shake the feeling that Chinedu's behavior had contributed to the tragedy. He began to question himself, his parenting, the decisions he had made, the warnings he had ignored. The guilt weighed heavily on him, but he couldn't bring himself to share those thoughts with Amaka. She was too fragile, too consumed by her own grief, and Femi didn't want to add to her pain, so he kept the feelings bottled up, silently wrestling with his doubts and fears. Amaka, on the other hand, was consumed by anger. She blamed everyone but herself. She blamed the school, the teachers, the system, and even Femi. She was convinced that Chinedu's death was an accident that could have been prevented if people had only understood her son better. But deep down, beneath the layers of denial, there was a gnawing guilt that she refused to face. She knew on some level that her refusal to discipline Chinedu had played a role in his behavior, but acknowledging that truth was too painful to bear. One evening, after another day of silence between Femi and Amaka, Femi finally broke down. He couldn't take it anymore. The distance, the coldness, the overwhelming sense of loss. Amaka, please, we need to talk, he said, his voice raw with emotion. Amaka looked at him, her eyes hollow and distant. What's there to talk about? She asked, her voice flat. Her son is dead. Femi, what else is there to say? Femi's heart aches as her words. I know, Amaka, but we can't keep living like this. We are falling apart. I don't want to lose you too. Amaka's expression hardened. You already lost me, Femi, she said quietly. You lost me when you started blaming me for everything. You think I don't know what you're thinking? That it's my fault that Chinedu is dead? That's not what I'm saying, Femi replied, his voice pleading. I'm scared, Amaka. I'm scared that we are never going to get through this, that we are going to lose everything. Not just Chinedu, but us. Amaka turned away from him, her shoulders trembling as she tried to hold back the tears. It's too late, Femi, she whispered. We already lost everything. Femi reached out to her, trying to offer some kind comfort, but she pulled away, rejecting him. His heart shattered all over. He didn't know how to reach her anymore, and he didn't know how to heal the wounds that had been inflicted on their marriage. As the days turned into weeks, the distance between them only grew wider. Femi started spending more time away from home, finding solace in his work and the company of his friends. He couldn't bear the tension that hung over the house, the suffocating silence that had taken over their lives. Meanwhile, Amaka sank deeper into her grief. She stopped taking care of herself, barely eating, and refused to engage with the outside world. The cracks in their marriage became more apparent with each passing day. The breaking point came one night when Femi came home late, smelling of alcohol. He had been out with colleagues trying to escape the crushing weight of his emotions. When he walks into the house, he found Amaka sitting in the dark, waiting for him. Where the hell have you been? She asked, her voice cold and accusatory. Out, Femi replied, too exhausted to argue. Out where? Femi demanded, her voice rising. You've been avoiding me, Femi. You think I don't know? You can't even stand to be in the same room as me. Femi sighed, rubbing his temples. Amaka, please, not tonight. I am tired. Tired? You are tired. What about me, Femi? What about what I am going through? I know you're hurting, Amaka, Femi said, his voice cracking with emotions. But I am hurting too, and I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make things better. Amaka's eyes filled with tears, but her anger didn't fade. You can't make things better, Femi, she spat, because you are part of the problem. You never supported me. You never believed in me. And now, look where we are. Femi's frustration boiled over. This isn't about you, Amaka, he shouted. We both lost Chinedu. We both failed our team. But we can't keep tearing each other apart like this. We need to move forward or we are going to destroy ourselves. Amaka wasn't ready to hear it. The pain was too deep, too raw. She lashed out, accusing Femi of abandoning her, of not caring about their son, of being the reason their lives had fallen apart. The argument escalated and Femi couldn't take it anymore. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him, leaving Amaka alone in the room. As he drove away, he knew that something had broken between them that night, something that couldn't be repaired. The argument marked the beginning of the end for their marriage. The distance between them became insurmountable, and the weight of their loss was too heavy for either of them to carry. In the months that followed, they drifted further apart, with Femi spending more time away from home and Amaka retreating deeper into her isolation. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Femi filed for a divorce, realizing that there was no way to salvage what was left of their relationship. The love they had once shared had been consumed by tragedy, leaving only bitterness and regret. One evening, after weeks of avoiding the inevitable, Femi came home with a heavy heart. His face was pale, his expression solemn, and he walked with a burden too heavy for him to carry any longer. He knew what he had to do, but the thought of it felt like tearing out a piece of his soul. Amaka was sitting in the living room, her eyes fixed blankly on the television. She barely acknowledged Femi's presence as he entered the room. The silence between them was suffocating, filled with unspoken words and emotions that built up over the months since Chinedu's death. Femi stood in the doorway for a moment, gathering the courage to say what he had been dreading. Finally, he stepped forward, his voice slow and trembling. Amaka, he began, we need to talk. Amaka turned slowly to face him, her eyes distant. Femi, what's there to talk about? She asked, her voice flat. We've said everything already. Femi reached into his bag and pulled out a stack of papers. his hands trembling slightly as he placed them gently on the table in front of her. Amaka's gaze shifted to the paper, and the realization of what they were hit her like a cold wave. These are the divorce papers, Femi said quietly, his voice filled with regret. I don't know how to fix this, Amaka. We are only hurting each other, and I don't know any other way forward. Amaka stared at the papers for a long moment, her hands shaking as she reached for them. She scanned the words, but the reality of what was happening didn't fully register until she saw Femi's signature at the bottom of the page. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Her anger flared up in an instant. She dropped the papers on the table and stood up. You want to divorce me? She asked, her words laced with disbelief. After everything we've been through, you want to just throw it all away? Amaka, this isn't about throwing it away, Femi said, trying to keep his voice steady. We've both lost so much, and I don't know how to make things right. I feel like we are tearing each other apart by staying together. Amaka's eyes flashed with anger. You think I don't know why you're doing this? She shouted. You think I don't know what this is really about? Amaka, please, Femi pleaded, his voice cracking. This isn't about blame. We both made mistakes, but don't you dare say it's not about blame. Amaka cut him off, her voice rising. You allowed the doctors to remove my womb. You stood there and let them take away the one thing that gave me a chance to be a mother again. Femi recoiled, the accusation hitting him like a punch to the gut. Amaka, I didn't want to lose you, he said desperately. The doctor said it was the only way to save your life. Save my life? Amaka repeated bitterly, her voice shaking. What kind of life have I had since then, Femi? You took away everything. My child, my future, my chance to be a mother again. And now, because we can't have another child, you want to get rid of me. Femi's eyes filled with tears. Amaka, that's not true, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I have loved you, Amaka, but we are both hurting so much, and I don't know how to fix it. I just thought maybe this would help us find some peace. Peace? Amaka's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. There is no peace after what you've done. You've taken everything away from me, Femi, and now you want to leave me. Femi reached out to her, wanting to comfort her, but she pulled away, her face contorted in pain and anger. You want peace, she whispered, her voice filled with bitterness. There is no peace left for me because you've destroyed everything. Amaka turned away from him, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Femi stood there helpless, his heart breaking as he watched the woman he loved fall apart. He had no words left, no way to make things better. The damage had been done, and there was no way to undo it. I am so sorry, Femi whispered, his voice barely audible. I am really sorry. But Amaka couldn't hear him through her grief. She crumpled the divorce paper in her hands, throwing them across the room in a fit of rage. Get out, Femi, she said through clenched teeth. Get out of my sight. I can't stand to look at you anymore. Femi stood frozen, his heart aching as he realized this was truly the end. The woman he had once shared his life with, who had been his best friend, his love, was now a stranger, consumed by grief and anger. He knew there was nothing left to say, nothing he could do to fix what had been broken. Without another word, Femi turned and walked out of the house. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed through the empty halls. As he drove away, a deep sense of loss settled over him. He knew that he had just left behind not only his wife, but the last remnants of the life they had built together. In the weeks following the bitter confrontation over the divorce papers, Amaka found herself alone in the quiet of their living room, her thoughts heavy with uncertainty. The weight of everything that had happened, the loss, the anger, the broken dreams, seemed to press down on her. She hadn't expected to hear from Femi again, not after the divorce paper had been thrown across the room in anger. Femi stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her as she sat, her eyes distant. Then with a deep breath, he stepped forward and spoke softly. Amaka. She turned slowly, her face still marked by the pain of everything they had been through. There was sadness in her eyes that Femi hadn't seen before, a deep exhaustion from carrying the weight of their shared grief. Femi sat down beside her. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Amaka, I have been thinking, he began. I know things between us have been incredibly difficult, and I know we've hurt each other, but I also know that we need to figure out what comes next. Amaka's eyes flickered with uncertainty. What is there to talk about? It feels like everything is broken. Femi nodded. I know it feels that way. And maybe some things are broken, but I believe we can try to rebuild. We've been through so much together to just give up now. I don't know if we'll ever fully heal, but I think we owe it to ourselves to try. Amaka looked down, her hands trembling in her lap. I don't know if I have the strength for this, she whispered. The wound is too deep. I don't even know where to begin. Femi reached for her hand, holding it gently. We don't have to know everything right now. We just have to be willing to accept, to face it together. We can't change what happened, but maybe we can start again, build something new, he said. Amaka's heart wavered. She wasn't sure if it was possible to move forward after all the pain they had endured, but there was a part of her that longed for the peace Femi spoke of. A small part of her wanted to believe that they could find healing even after everything had been lost. Over the next few months, they began to work through their issues, slowly and cautiously. They decided to seek therapy, sitting together in the therapist's office, sharing their pain and their guilt. The sessions were hard, each one dredging up emotions that they had buried deep. They argued, they cried, but they also began to understand each other's wounds in a way they hadn't before. Amaka finally began to confront her guilt, admitting that her overindulgence of Chinedu had played a role in the tragedy. Femi too acknowledged his part, recognizing that his silence had contributed to their son's downfall. It wasn't an easy process, and there were days when both of them wondered if it was worth the effort. But slowly, they began to rebuild their trust, finding moments of connection that reminded them of the love they had once shared. Meanwhile, the investigation into Chinedu's death reached its conclusion. An autopsy confirmed that while the beating had injured him, it was the fall that had ultimately caused his death. Mr. Hassan was sentenced to some years in prison, and the school was closed down for a full academic year due to its mishandling of the situation. Chinedu was finally laid to rest, and though the pain of losing him would never fully fade, there was a sense of closure that allowed Amaka and Femi to take their first steps towards healing. As they moved forward, Amaka and Femi began to talk about their future. They knew they could never replace Chinedu, but they both felt a longing to have a family once again. They began to explore the possibilities of adoption, a path that felt both daunting and hopeful. It was a decision that required time, patience, and emotional readiness, but it also offered them the chance to open their hearts to a new child. After a few months of research, discussions, and preparation, Amaka and Femi embarked on the adoption journey. The process was filled with its own set of challenges, but they remained committed to the idea of providing a loving home to a child in need. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they received the news that they had been waiting for. They had been matched with a newborn baby girl named Ifoma, which means good thing. The moment they held Ifoma in their arms for the first time, both Femi and Amaka felt something shift inside of them. The weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a profound sense of hope and joy. Ifeoma brought with her a light that filled the void left by Chinedu's death. She didn't replace their lost son, but she gave them a new reason to smile, a new future to look forward to. And as the months passed, Amaka and Femi settled into their roles as new parents, finding joy in the small moments, feeding Ifeoma, rocking her to sleep, watching her grow. They weren't perfect, and there were still days when the sadness of their past crept in, but they faced those days together, supporting one another in ways they hadn't before. Their journey to adopt Ifeoma had been about more than just finding a new child to love. It had been about finding themselves again. Through their grief, they had rediscovered their strength, their resilience, and their love for one another. The love they had for Ifeoma became a source of healing, helping them mend the wounds that had once threatened to tear them apart. In time, Ifeoma and Femi's relationship grew. They learned to communicate better, to lean on each other in moments of weakness, and to celebrate the new life they were building with Ifoma. They knew that their past would always be a part of them, but they also knew that their future was full of possibilities. Their story had been one of heartbreak and loss, but it has also become a story of resilience and renewal. Amaka and Femi had faced their darkest days, but they had come out the other side stronger and more united than ever. Ifuma's presence in their lives was a testament to their perseverance, a reminder that even after the greatest sorrow, there is always a hope for a new beginning. The story of Amaka and Femi teaches important lessons about love, grief, and parenting. It shows that facing challenges can lead to healing, while avoiding difficult conversations only deepens the divide. The tragedy of Chinedu's death highlights the importance of raising a child with proper discipline and boundaries, as overindulgence can lead to destructive behavior. Ultimately, the story reminds us that even after a great loss, hope and new beginnings are possible if we confront our pain and work together to rebuild. Thank you so much for watching this fantastic story on African Stories by Tiana. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing stories. See you next time.